Hi guys, and welcome to Bubblegummonsters and this edition of our tips and tricks. Well, in this episode we're going to be looking at how we made a 3D printed bendy. There you go, look, it's looking absolutely fantastic. But two of you lucky guys are going to be able to win one of these bendies. All you got to do is just carry on watching the video and find out how. See you in a minute. Ever since Peter started making the 3D bubblegum monsters, we thought it'd be really cool if we could print them out in real life. And although this isn't a printer review, I will say that the Wanhao Duplicator i3 Plus, or as our bubblegummies have affectionately become to call it, the bubblegum machine, we have to say we have not been disappointed. It's a fantastic entry-level printer, and I've included links in the description below to where you can buy and review it. Right. Let's get on and let's see what goes on behind the scenes to make a 3D printed bendy. Hope you enjoy the video. So right, the first thing we need to do is load in the model file. Now I've chosen Bendy, which Peter made in our live making a bubblegum monster a few weeks ago. Now he outputs the files from ZBrush in an object file, which is something that Cura can understand. Right, now I've loaded him in, I can see that he's laying flat. And also he's tiny. So the first thing I'll do is rotate him, so I'll get him standing up straight. Now with some models it actually works in your favour to actually print them at a slight angle, but Bendy's a quite simple model, so I shouldn't be necessary for this one. And as we said, he's tiny. Now I can look at scaling him up by the drag handles on the actual model itself, or I prefer actually typing in the data, so be a bit more exact. We normally build our models 100mm high, but because this is over a time lapse, I've actually decided to use a slightly smaller model, so I selected 75mm. Right, so the next step is I'm going to have to examine the layers. I need to see if there's going to be any overhang. Now that's where the printer is effectively printing in midair. Now straight away I can actually see that both the hands are going to be a problem. His outstretched arm is going to be printing onto nothing, and the same with the one tucked in on his side. So with Cura I can examine each layer and actually check or start to see where there may be a problem. Now his foot is looking reasonably okay, and there the hand in particular, as you can see, it just starts printing in midair. No support underneath it for the printer to actually lay the filament on, and there again with the fingertips there's nothing supporting it. All you're going to get is a drip from the printer which doesn't actually form onto anything, so it would never form the hand properly. So what we need to do is tell Cura that we're going to need some support structure, so the printer will actually print something underneath those points, so it's not effectively printing in midair. If we didn't, we'll just get blobs forming. Now I've got two choices here. If I select touch and build plate, it's only going to build a structure underneath the areas the model actually touches the build plate. In this case, his outstretched arm. But that's no good for us, so I'm going to have to select everywhere. Now I've selected everywhere, I'm just going back through the layers just to double check that the areas which could cause us problems is actually going to have a structure built underneath it. And I can see his hand at his side tucked in, well that's going to have a structure there. And I can also see that the fingertips are actually going to have a structure on his outstretched arm. So I'm pretty confident that with those support structures that he should actually print quite well. I'm just checking now that those areas of concern, the hand, are actually going to be printing onto something. I can see that hand is there, and the tips of the fingers, yeah, great. Okay, so we've got support structure under there, something for the printer to print on. So I'm just going to double check the settings as well. Okay, those support settings look great. Now I'll look at the platform adhesion type when I've selected raft. In my experience, that tends to work for our models quite well. Right, so let's look at the print quality. Now at the moment the print quality is set at 0.15, which is okay, but it's not the quality we're looking at. I prefer a higher quality, so I normally select 0.1mm. The shell thickness, well, ideally that should be a multiple of the nozzle size. Now the nozzle we use is 0.4mm, so I tend to select a multiple of that. In my experience, 0.8 creates a perfect shell type. Now we look at the density here. Our models aren't toys, so they don't have to be completely solid, but I prefer an infill of around about 15%. I tend to leave the printing speed to what it is, 50mm a second. It's worked out quite well for me so far. But the printing temperature, with this particular PLA filament, I find that a temperature of around 220 degrees is perfect. The bed temperature ideally should be somewhere between 50 and 70 degrees. I think 55 works out quite well. Right, Bendy's looking great, and it's time to get him printed. Now, Cura is a slicing software. It essentially divides that model up into layers. But what we need to do is we need to create a G-code. And a G-code is what the printer understands. Cura does that conversion for us, and it sends it to the printer as a G-code, which essentially just tells the printer where to move its head and what to do next. There we go, let's call him Time-Lapse Bendy, TL Bendy. Now we've got the finished 3D print, we need to look at start removing some of these support structures. With some models, I sometimes use long nose pliers to get rid of the support structures, but with this model, I prefer to use a modelling knife. I have included the links in the description below for any of the products if you want to check them out. Now remember guys, if you're using a modelling knife, please be very careful as they're very, very sharp. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and it gave you an insight in what goes on behind the scenes in making a 3D printed bubblegum monster. Now we have our next live making a bubblegum monster coming up on Friday the 2nd of June at 5:30 British Summer Time. So that's 2nd of June, 5:30 BST. Now, I did mention at the beginning of the video how 2 of you lucky guys are going to win one of these 3D printed bendies, which we will announce live during our Making a Bubblegum Monster on Friday the 2nd of June, 5:30 BST. Now, all we need is you to be a subscriber and answer this simple question. By what other name has our 3D printer become known? What other name has our 3D printer become known? Now, all the correct answers in the comments below will be entered into a hat and will be drawn on Friday during our live Making a Bubblegum Monster at 5:30 British Summer Time. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video guys, and until next time, ta-da for now. Bye.